What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing you a video on Kamen Rider Build episode 25. This episode is called The Idol Awakens, and the episode overall was pretty good. We didn't get any new best matches, but we got some new trial modes, and a whole bunch of other information was unveiled in this episode overall, and some big moments happened. So we'll get into that this episode. For starters, the episode begins with us seeing the continuation of the previous episode, like they do in most episodes of the show, where it seems that Mizora arrives on the scene and she doesn't have exact consciousness of what she's doing, and what happens is that suddenly, when she arrives on the scene, she suddenly pushes some energy out and ends up picking up Rogue and the Washio Bros and then creating a gigantic hole in the skywall and tossing them through it. So they ended up on the other side of the skywall, which is insane. And, you know, everyone's really like, what just happened here? But following this, Mizora does faint and falls on the ground. And at that point, Sento and Ryoga and everyone go over to check on her to see what's up. So, following this, what does end up happening is that they return back to the base, and they're all very curious as to how this could have happened. One thing I forgot to also mention that she does end up saying before she faints is Evolt. Evolt. E-V-O-L-T. Which is interesting because there's supposed to be eventually a rider called Kamen Rider Evol, which is E-V-O-L. So, I'm curious as to whether or not that will be her, or is she warning of something else? I wonder, you know, or maybe she is Kamen Rider Evol. We'll have to wait and see. So, anyway, following this, what does end up happening is that, they begin to wonder how this could have happened and all that. Eventually, Sento ends up contacting, Suichi to ask him what he knows, because obviously he is her father, to see how she got the bangle and all that. And what he tells Sento is that it was a present from Mars, and when it attached onto her, it stayed there. And the thing is that clearly it has special abilities and all that, but at the same time he doesn't know everything about it. Now, the other thing that we also learn about is something very important about Namba. The thing is that those that are that pledge allegiance to Namba are typically meant to be the Namba children, which are people that typically at a young age pledge allegiance to him and are trained in science, military, and other means of warfare. Because again, he's all about the heavy industries and all that, and military weapons. So, in other words, the Washio Bros and Utsumi, they're all aligned with Namba, and they are considered Namba children because of that. Does that mean that Utsumi was working for Namba from the start? Not very clear, but Utsumi is now considered of the Namba children. So that is important to know. What does end up happening from here, though, is that after we learn all that information, what we do end up seeing is that they decide that they need to. What we do also hear is that apparently Saito does have a spy in the area, and the thing is that it begins to be the question of who could this spy be, because apparently the spy has all the intel being sent to the Prime Minister of Saito. So the question is, who is it? So what happens is that they decide to move the Pandora's box, and they decide to give different members of the staff for Totoro different locations for where the Pandora's box is. The reason why they do that is for the purposes of figuring out who could this spy be. So they give each of them different locations where it will be, and they do plant it in one place. So that is important to note. So following this, what does end up happening is that eventually, after moving it and everything, the spy does end up contacting the Saito Prime Minister. And at that point, what does end up happening is that the Washio Bros go to deal with the incident, so they go to a factory. In the meantime, Rogue has his own mission set up to go to a different location. So what does end up happening is that the Washio Bros head off to the location, and the thing is that in the meantime we end up seeing back at the cafe that Sento and Mizora are talking to each other. Sento ends up pulling up an image showing off the destruction of Mars and an experience that happened. And the thing is that Mizora recognizes this experience because it is what she sees every single time she purifies the bottle. And when she wants the image to stop, what she typically does, what typically happens is that by the time that it stops finally, that's when the bottle is purified. So that's something that's kind of interesting to note that we actually know of now. Also, it seems to be more of a warning to her that you have to stop certain things from happening so that this doesn't happen to Earth. So that's an interesting point, and it makes me very curious now what that could lead to in the future. So what does end up happening from here is that Mizora and Sento do talk to each other, and Mizora says that she really wants to help and all that, and things are changing up. And what does end up happening is that at one point they do get a contacted message basically saying that the Washio Bros are attacking the factory. So at that point what happens is that Sento and Ryoga go to head off and check the factory. In the meantime, we also see that Grease and the remaining Hokuto member are in their own hideout area, so they're not actually in the cafe, which is interesting. I'm kind of interested as to why that is, although I think that has to do with their significance in this episode. In other words, like, that's probably not where they actually are staying the whole time. It's just because of the fact that they have a role for this episode that leads to them being there for the time being. So what does end up happening is that Grease ends up going out and basically says to just stay put and watch over things here, and they also plan on burying Aoba and Kiba's dog tags the next day. So that's a plan that they actually have in mind. Following this, what does end up happening is that we end up seeing Sento and Ryoga fight the Washio Bros. Thing is, there's no Pandora's box in the factory, and what does end up happening is that Sento actually uses two new trial modes. His first new trial mode is a whale fire truck trial mode, which is interesting, and he also uses a rose fire truck trial mode. So we haven't seen either of those trial modes before, and it is cool to see them used. He fights using those. He eventually does transform into Rabbit Tank Sparkling, and eventually they do finish their battle. At one point, Grease does arrive on the scene and he continues to fight as well, but eventually they do, and the Washio Bros do end up retreating after Ryoga shows an increased strength in his hazard mode form. So, his hazard mode form, what am I saying? When Ryoga shows an increased strength in his hazard level. So eventually, after all this is said and done, what we do end up seeing is that they return to the Prime Minister's office, where they confirm who they believe to be the snitch or the spy for Saito, and the one that's leaking all the information to Saito. So what they go over is that they inform different people of different locations for the Pandora's box, but the one that they informed of the factory was the Prime Minister's aide. So all the aides were informed, and the one that they believe was the one that stands right next to him, who is the one that's in the exact same room that they were in. And what happens is that he ends up using a bottle and basically fades from existence, and basically says like Namba will take over or something like that. And at that point, he's done. So in other words, they learned who the spy was, but following this, what does end up happening is that we end up seeing Rogue enter the scene of the location where the remaining Hokuto member is. And what happens is that I guess Rogue knew that the location that the Washio Bros were sent to was a different location, which could also mean that there were two spies. Yeah, that could actually mean that there were two spies, because how would Rogue know of a separate location? He has to have some other intel, in other words, right? You would think that. We don't know for a fact, but that's what I would assume, because otherwise, how would he guess that there would be a second location? So that is important. What does end up happening is that the remaining member does transform into his castle hard smash mode and begins to fight Rogue. In the meantime, what does end up happening is that they try to contact him, specifically Kazumi, but the thing is that Kazumi can't get through to him, or Greece. So what does end up happening is that Ryoga, Sento, and Kazumi end up heading towards the location of the Pandora's box, and when they get there, they see this battle going on, and what does end up happening is that eventually Rogue, or Gentaku, manages to destroy him, and at that point what happens is that the Hokuto trio is completely destroyed. So all three members are now gone. They are done for. So that is interesting to note, of course. And the thing is that Kazumi feels that he was the dumbest, but he was the one that he was the most proud of. So it really hurt him a lot. His name was Mazzaro or something like that. That probably was his real name. Again, they typically only refer to their real names like once, and then their other name, which is the name that they use for when they're the Hokuto trio, most of the time. So yeah, again, all three of them are now destroyed. That has now officially happened. It took until episode 25 for that to happen, which is fine. But yeah, so they're all gone now, and now it's just going to be Greece. That's the only member from Hokuto. So what does end up happening from here is that the three of them, so in other words, Sento, Kazumi, and Ryoga transform. We actually see them transform next to each other, which is very cool, because it really shows that they're now a team and they're not going to be separate anymore. They're going to be united, because now since the Hokuto trio isn't there, they're going to stick together. That's going to be an interesting thing to see from here. So what does end up happening is that they do transform, they begin to fight, and Sento does use his Rabbit Tank Sparkling mode at first. The thing is that as this battle progresses, eventually Sento does end up using Rabbit Tank Hazard mode, and what does end up happening is that he manages to knock back Rogue. Well, the thing is that even though he manages to knock him back and hurt him, doesn't manage to defeat him. And what Rogue decides to do, because he actually lands near the Pandora's box, is he grabs it and then he flies out of there and creates a gigantic hole in the building. So at that point, Rogue does have the Pandora's box. That's important. Mizora does arrive on the scene as well, because she wants to help out and make sure that there aren't any problems. So that is also very important. But what does end up happening is that eventually, in the meantime, Ryoga gets beaten up a bunch by Rogue prior to escaping, and at the same time, Sento ends up beating up on Kazumi. And what does end up happening is that Kazumi de-transforms from Grease to his human form. At that point, what happens is that Sento, in his Rabbit Tank Hazard mode, goes over to Mizora. And the thing is that she wanted to help and all that, but suddenly she is grabbed by the neck, and suddenly, as she's grabbed by the neck, a pulse of energy from her bangle releases, and suddenly part of the Rabbit Tank Hazard mode begins to glow. And that's how the episode ends. So the preview it shows for episode 26, it looks like it's going to have another proxy battle happening. Now, does that mean that next episode will actually have the proxy battle? It's unclear, but it is expected to happen. So in other words, the proxy battles, again, those are the battles that would determine who would win Hokuto versus Totoro in the previous one. This time it's going to be Totoro versus Saito. So in other words, it's going to be another one of those kind of battles. What we do also see is that the combined mode of the Washio Bros will be happening. The Washio Bros do have a combined mode, we just haven't seen it yet. And what that that mode is called is the Hell Bros. That's what they're actually going to be called in that combined mode. So keep that in mind. That should be coming, next week. So that is awesome. And again, we're about halfway through the season so far. If we haven't already reached that point, we don't know yet when the actual halfway point will be. But yeah, we're doing pretty well so far. And very soon, in the next couple of weeks, if not next week, it's not clear because the preview didn't show it, but something tells me it could be happening either next week or the week after, that we will finally get the Rabbit, and the Tank full bottle modes, which are the hazard modes in their purified state where Sento can actually control himself. So that's something to note, and that should be happening relatively soon. It's supposed to happen in March, so keep that in mind. Like, if you're wondering when that mode finally happens, it's supposed to happen in March, and most likely that mode will be the mode that will allow Sento to actually defeat Rogue. It's just a question of when will it be introduced. So keep that in mind. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I would love to hear your guys' opinions about this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.